Take two. All right. The NHL has been nothing if not consistent in its illogical ways of figuring things out. And this is no different. You've got 10 teams, things stay relatively the same. There's still a New York Americans team in the Canadian division, a Canadian division led by the Montreal Canadiens, who were 22-7-15. The New York Americans 19-13-12, Toronto Maple Leafs 21-18-5, Ottawa 14-17-3, Montreal 15-20-9. On the American side, Boston leads the way 26-13-5, the New York Rangers 21-13-10, Detroit 19-16-9, Pittsburgh 9-27-8, and Chicago 7-29-8. So rough times for Chicago and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's going to be on its way out pretty soon, but we'll get into that at a later date with a later video. As we get closer to the actual original 6 era. But for now, we're at 10. And you'll notice a lot of ties. There also wasn't very many goals. Overtime changed from sudden death to just playing 10 minutes. Why? Why? Can you imagine the NHL now coming out and going, we've decided to take the 5-on-5 overtime, or 5-minute overtime of 3-on-3. And instead of making it sudden death, it's just going to be the full 5 minutes. So if both teams score, it's still a tie. Yeah, you wipe out the shootout and you just go, it's just a tie. That would be insane, wouldn't it? And that's what the NHL does here. They take something that was decisive and they make it indecisive. George Hainsworth set a record that year for Montreal with 22 shutouts. And I don't know how many of those were in wins and how many of those were in ties. Because goal scoring is at an all-time low this season. Why? Because you're not allowed to make a forward pass in the offensive zone. Yeah, they allowed forward passing in the neutral zone and in your own zone, but not in the offensive zone. So how difficult would it be to set anything up ever if you have to make a back pass as soon as you pass the blue line? Oh, NHL. This is way before my time, and it was still like, why are they doing this? Why? This was also the season that saw the first ever All-American final. How? Well, it's not the New York Americans. It's not like the New York Americans emerged from the Canadian division. No, the NHL decided the playoffs were too logical as well, and they needed to change those to take logic out. Now, I've been discussing how you have a 2-game series, and it's total goals. Well, sometimes you have total goals, and sometimes you have a best of 3 or a best of 5. Ta-da! Hart Trophy winner was Roy Werters. Vezina Trophy, 22 shutouts. George Hainsworth, no clue why anybody else would even get consideration. 0.92 goals against average. And remember, the Vezina does go to the goaltender with the lowest goals against average. So I try to play this up like, hey, look who won. But really, the Vezina is not voted on until the 80s. The Lady Byng, Frank Boucher, wins that. So things are they're pretty good. Let's get into Series A. Oh, right. Yeah. So technically, what we're looking at here, now I've made it simple because the NHL didn't. This is Series A right here. This is Series B. This is Series C, D, and E. Isn't that sexy? Yeah. I decided, you know what, I'm just going to call them quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. And I'll have to explain this to people, and people are going to be like, wow, that doesn't make any sense. So you'll notice Montreal and Boston play in the first round, Series A. It's a best of 5 matchup. Why? The winner gets to go to the Stanley Cup final. You get a bye to the finals. Congratulations. No, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, let's look at it anyways. Boston sweeps this one. They win by scores of 1-0, 1-0, and 3-2. So Montreal, no games for them. They're done. They go home. Quarterfinals, Series B. The New York Rangers and New York Americans scoreless tie in Game 1. The New York Rangers win Game 2, 1-0 in double overtime. You had to wait 5 periods for a single goal in this series. And that was the entire series, was that one goal. Man. Series C, so this is the Canadian one. Or no, actually. So this is Rangers, Americans, Detroit, Toronto. This is even worse than it looks on the surface. So it was all cross-pollinated. So first versus first, second versus second, third versus third. And the first place teams are fighting out to see who goes to the Stanley Cup final. Oh, NHL. Anyways, yeah. So Toronto wins that series by a score of 7-2. Series D. I call this the semifinal. I know I'm crazy, right? So you have Toronto and the Rangers. The Rangers win 1-0 in Game 1. They win Game 2, 2-1 in overtime to win the best of 3 series, 2-0. Then the Stanley Cup Final, which is also a best of 3. This might be a good time to reflect on the fact that Series A between Boston and Montreal, the first place teams, was a best of 5 matchup. The Stanley Cup Finals, the series where you decide who ultimately is the best team in the league, potentially the world, depending on how arrogant you are about the NHL, that's a best of 3. Boston wins both games, 2-0 in Game 1, and then they go into Madison Square Garden. I assume, unless it was the circus and they had to pour ice outside, they win 2-1 in Game 2 to sweep the Stanley Cup Final in 2 games. It's amazing that this is Boston's first Stanley Cup. That they play the Rangers in the final, who are the second place team from their division. And yet, as weird a setup as this is, there might be something to be learned from it, potentially. But again, modern day, you've got teams that are from all over the continent, so you can't really cross-pollinate like this. Oh, that's so weird. Just imagine if at the end of this past season, you had Vegas. The equivalent would be you'd have Vegas playing off with Nashville. You'd have Tampa playing off with Washington. And the winners would get a bye to the semifinals. So they don't have to get through rounds 1 and 2. They just have to get through each other to get to round 3. And we can all debate what does or doesn't work there. But Boston plays here, and they play here, and they don't lose a game. They're 5-0 in those playoffs. So, pretty impressive. Boston with 3 shutouts in those 5 games. And overall, it's a nice victory for Boston, but it is one weird, wonky why. Why do you change overtime from sudden death to not sudden death? Why would you do that? Why? It would be the equivalent of somebody saying this game of Monopoly doesn't go on long enough. I think we should make it so you can't go broke. Gunshots would ring out. Anyways, so there you go. It's the 1928-29 season. We are getting close to the end for the Pittsburgh Pirates and for the Ottawa Senators. And the Montreal Maroons and the New York Americans will hold on for a while after. But we will end up with... Nope. Not these guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The original 6. 2 Canadians, 4 Americans. And that's where it really changes. Where the league completely changes. Even though Toronto and Montreal will become the dominant teams. They're not there yet. There you go. The weird, strange playoff season of 1928-29. A season without forward passes. They would change that in 1929-1930. And we'll see a huge change in goals against averages and in goal totals. But we'll get to that tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for watching today. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. I will talk to you again soon.